What's up guys, Shawnthebro here, and today we're going to be going over the pause menu and actually pausing the game, so everything will stop when we pause it. There's things we can do to change and decide what gets paused and what doesn't. For now, we're going to pause everything, and honestly, that's pretty much how it should be. The only other time I think that you may want to pause only certain things is like we don't want to probably pause the music and things like that, but it's all up to you. So I'm going to go over that, and I'm also going to show you a few new things that I've added to the series with some help from friends in my Discord and things like that that were just good decisions in my opinion to add. So let's start with the pause menu. Okay, so you can see here that we're in our game, and maybe we want to pause our game. We gotta take a break, whatever, you know, whatever comes up. We may need to pause our game at some point. We can press the P key to now pause the game. That was what was coming up when we pressed P before, was the input action mapping binding thing, where we could change our controls. Now that's going to be part of the pause menu. It might be only part of like the main menu, pause menu, or excuse me, the main menu options menu, depending on what you want to do. But you could bind it at any point. You could do it in here. It doesn't really cause any issues or add any complications. That video was more just a template for how to do that, and obviously we weren't going to keep it there. So you can spawn it now if you want. I'll be adding it because I'm going to be adding a full menu system. Obviously we have to flush out the command list. And yeah, so don't worry about that for now. Let's just switch it out for the pause menu. And this will come up when we press P. You see the timer has stopped. The actual game has stopped. The only thing we may want to continue, like I said, is the music or something like that. So we're going to keep it paused like this. Now I can use my arrow keys or my mouse to select the buttons that I want and press them. But here's the thing. Now we either need this pause menu to be controlled by two players, or we need two separate pause menus, one for player 1 and one for player 2. That is not going to be covered in today's episode, not because it's complicated. We've essentially already done it on the character select screen, but instead because when we do the command list screen, that is something we need to differentiate very early on, and I figured that we just cover it all in one. I don't think it's necessary to be covered on the pause menu, but instead if we cover it in the command list, and I'll show you why when we're on that episode, I think it'll make sense for how you can do it for every other widget in the game. Okay, so now again, it's a little hard to see, but I have this white dotted line that's the autofocus for Unreal. Feel free to replace this with the borders that we added on the character select screen, stage select screen, all that. But for now, I can press enter and resume the game. Simple enough. I can pause it and go to my command list and press it. Doesn't do anything, but it would just create our widget for it. Then I can rematch. If we rematch, all of our variables are reset correctly. Again, my input stack isn't cleared, which is actually on purpose, because that was what I wasn't doing in my game modes reset. So make sure if you're going to use that method instead of level streaming down the line, you want to keep that method, that you go ahead and clear your input stack. But you can see everything resets as it should, which is great. And lastly, we can go back to the main menu and then continue our life from here. Okay. So pretty simple stuff. Today's episode should be pretty easy. It's going to be all in Blueprint, but I do believe it deserves an episode of its own. I'm going to fix a minor bug that I made in the default game mode BP, where I did not set the timer active to be false during our resetting of the match values. This is what I was just talking about with the input stack. So if you have not watched the other episodes of the series, this may be confusing to you, and that's okay. I'll leave a link in the iCard right here if you want to look at the first episode in the series. We're very far along. I think we're episode 57 at this point. We do one every week, every Sunday. So yeah, this is without level streaming. However, to be fair, like I said, it's very useful. You can definitely use it down the line and for your whole project and make it look nice. So I don't want to just ignore it. I want to have the option open to you. And I've already covered everything in it, so I'm not going to cover it again. But make sure you set the timer active to be false. Otherwise, it'll keep ticking while you're doing your entrances on your rematch, and we don't want that. So just go ahead and do this to make it look a little bit neater, if you care about it. If you don't, great. That's the only node we're adding for now, so you can feel free to just skip the last, like, 30 seconds. Okay. Now we're going to need our character blueprint as well. You should go to your base, which for me is my mutant. We had an open pause menu input action. And I wasn't actually opening the pause menu. It was called open pause menu, but I was opening my remapping widget because that's all we had at the time. And that's fine. But let's go ahead and see this as one fluid action. So if we go to edit project settings input, we have all of our mappings. I have an open pause menu, and it's the P key. Now, we should also add controller bindings, but I'm doing an entire episode. I'm working in the background on controller input on menus for player 1 and player 2. Obviously, we have that working to an extent, but I want, and we need all the menus to work for player 1 and player 2. So don't worry about that now. Unless you know how to do it, then go ahead. But we'll cover all that in a future episode. But I have my input mapping, my input action here. And then I have my key, which is P. I think that's good enough for the keyboard, because if 2 people are playing on a keyboard, then, you probably don't need 2 different pause menus. Or 2 different pause buttons. And again, this is essentially the exact same logic that was already in here. But we're going to switch it to our versus pause menu now. Go ahead and go to where you make your widgets. I go blueprint, widgets, menus. Right click, user interface, widget, blueprint. Go ahead and call this one something like versus pause menu. Specifically that because it could be different. The logic could be different. So if you maybe do some sort of like, reset in story or rematch in story, maybe it replays the cutscene beforehand or dialogue or whatever you have in your story. Depends on your game. It could be different functionality wise. You may want to avoid, be careful to make sure they can't abuse it to either beat their character or beat the enemy they're facing or something like that. So I'm specifically calling this versus pause menu. And now in your character, you can go ahead and switch out your, let's see what I was calling it, the change control screen that we were using. Go ahead and change that to your versus pause menu. Make sure it gets added to the viewport. All right, and then let's go into our versus pause menu. And it's a very simple widget. I tried to keep it that way on purpose because no need to exaggerate this. Pausing is important, but you guys know how to work on menus by now. So I have text up at the top, just called pause menu title text. It doesn't change, it's just static. And then I have 4 buttons. I have all my scale boxes and size boxes so that it scales with the screen and keeps its ratio. If you want to learn more about those, I have an episode dedicated to anchors and scale boxes and size boxes so that everything can look nice and neat. My 4 buttons are literally just buttons. I brought them onto the screen. I've called them the name that's in the text with button at the end. So resume, command list, rematch, and quit to main menu buttons. The buttons have text as a child of them. So you can just click on text and drag it into one of these. I already have it there, so it'll say widget can't accept additional children, but it'll work for you if you have a button without text. You can also drag it onto the actual button itself. I've given the text names, but you don't really have to. I just called them resume button, command list button text, rematch button text, quit button text. And then, of course, I've changed our actual text. So very, very simple. I mean, it's the same stuff we've been doing. Nothing special there. And what we have to do is for all 4 of these buttons, or however many buttons you want, scroll down in the details panel and go to events and click on pressed for all of them. And that's where we will do our logic. And the logic itself is pretty simple too. But it is something that we haven't really covered before. So let's go over it. Okay, in event construct, and if for whatever reason you don't have this or you deleted it, you can just search for it and get it back, event construct. We can actually call an Unreal function to set the game state to paused. Now, you know me, I don't like using certain things that Unreal has, like for example, their states that they have, like is crouched, I believe is their variable. Like we use is crouching, and we use our own systems for a lot of these things. However, Unreal does a very good job with setting the game to be paused. I mean, it does a good job with the other things too, but I feel like you miss out on some functionality that you may want using that. The game paused functionality is pretty darn good. It pauses everything in real time like you'd want and resumes without any issue. So you don't have to worry about keeping track of all your objects and making sure they are, they work based off of time and things like that. Unreal already does that for you. And it makes our lives very easy. You can even continue to do some things like play music over it. So let's go ahead and do that. You just right click and literally search for set game paused. It's that simple. And then you check it, make sure paused is true. But there are some other things that we have to do since we're working with a menu inside of our game. It's not quite the same as a widget on like our main menu where we don't have our fighters in there and we're not controlling them. We need to explicitly set our input mode. I mean, we were doing this already when we entered the menus, and that's good, but we have to be very careful now. If we don't set this correctly, we won't be able to control our characters once we leave the menu. Or we'll still be able to control them once we're in the menu, and both are bad. Alright, so we need to do something called set input mode UI only. Now, I'm passing it player controller 0 in this case. We want both of them to be true, but we're not doing 2-player episodes yet. So this is the simple method where we use get player controller 0. The second method we use, we will actually set the 2-player controllers. We will give them reference to what they're going to be on, whether it's their own pause menu or if they're going to just be different buttons or different like highlighted sections on the same pause menu. And then we will set our input mode. So don't worry, we're aware of that. But for now, go ahead and get player controller. This top one here. And then you can leave it at player index 0. I think if you drag off this is the easiest way to set input mode without unchecking context sensitive. You want set input mode UI only. And then look, what it says is really important here. Set up an input mode that allows only the UI to respond to the user input. So that helps us avoid modifying anything in the game because we're still touching the proper buttons. And then it asks for an in widget to focus. You can leave it alone and it'll focus the pause menu, but it won't focus the button then. So you might as well just give it the button. So I just go ahead and make sure my resume button is a variable. In fact, all my buttons are considered variables. And then I go ahead and pass it that button. Okay, and I have a do not lock, which, again, it's up to you what you want for your mouse. Okay, and that should be paused, and that should be good. But we need to be able to resume it as well. And the process is, of course, very similar, but it's pretty much the exact opposite. So on press resume button, we need to unpause the game, first of all. And the way you do that is you call set game paused yet again. But then you leave paused unchecked. It's that simple. Now this return value here, I didn't mention it before, will say if the game was successfully paused or unpaused. To my knowledge, I've never had it not work in all the times I've used it. I probably used it at least 20 times throughout my Unreal career. I've never had it not pause or unpause. So I don't know exactly the state of which this would not work, but you can always, as a good practice, use this as like an error code, bring it into a branch, and then say only if it unpaused, then do this logic. That would be the smart way to go about things. You can see I'm being a little bit lazy here, but okay. Then we can remove from parent and just leave the target as self. Remove from parent, removes this widget from the viewport. So you can do it as just just like that. Just leave it as is. Then we get our player controllers again. In this case, we just need player controller 0. And we need to set our input mode to game only. We don't have any sort of widget to focus this time because we're not on UI, but we need to make sure that our pawns that we're possessing can be controlled. So input mode, game only. On press command list button, we'll go ahead and create a widget of command list, but we don't have the command list widget yet, so it's being left alone for now. And then I have my rematch and my quit the main menu. They're a little bit close together, so let me give them some space. Alright, so when we press the rematch button, we want to essentially reset all of our values and do the logic that we would for a rematch. We could simply set up some sort of interface to do this, or we can just grab our blueprint or our game mode BP and reset the match values. It's not really going to hurt us performance-wise to do this, and it's much easier. However, as we get more and more calls to reset match values or more and more calls to the game mode BP, we may want to do that in the future. For now, go ahead, get game mode, cast it to your game mode type, and then go ahead and call our reset match values function off of it. And this is this function right here, where we were just fixing that bug earlier about making the timer active or inactive when we reset. Then we actually perform the exact same logic. So this should really be a function at this point, or some sort of event. Probably just an event up right here along resume button. But these are the same things. We set the game not to be paused. We remove this widget from the parent, which gets rid of it from the viewport. Then we get our player controller and make sure that it's looking at input mode as game only. Lastly, we have quit the main menu. We do want to set the game pause to be false before we open the level, because it can cause some issues. This set game paused is kind of an overarching thing where, you know, you set it and it can actually stay set for, you know, I don't know if it stays set through levels, but it can stay set through level streaming. It can stay set opening up of other widgets. If you're not careful, it can mess you up a bit. So I always like to unset it, or excuse me, set it to be paused as false when I'm done with the pause menu, even if we're not going back into the game right away. I think it's just a good practice. You should probably remove it from parent as well, but it's not really going to matter in this case because we're just going to open this main menu widget, or this main menu level, and it's not going to be there. So it's going to essentially automatically get cleaned up by Unreal. And then, yeah, you just call open level. We've done this before, but you call open level, and then you pass in the level name. Main menu is my level name for this, where I have my character select screen, so it does all that logic. Alright, and that's pretty much all I've got for the pause menu. I do have some additional changes that I've made, again, from suggestions in the Discord and just bugs that I found, and I thought you guys might be interested in checking them out. So this should only take about 2 minutes. But with the help of Anima Mundi in the Discord, as well as some other members, I've gone ahead and adjusted a few things, and I'll just kind of go over it like this so you can see what's going on. You can dissect it if you want. But you've probably noticed that the display character choice was happening on move now, as opposed to on confirm. So as we move, it changes. And that is because we are now doing the logic to display the character choice and set the current skin, or the current selection on move selection as opposed to confirm selection. Another important thing, we have to make sure the stage select screen is not up before we change characters, because I actually did not do that and the stage select screen was one over the other. So if you're doing it on move and not confirm, your character's actually moving, your character's actually changing as you move, which is not what we want. So that's something we would have to fix as a result of that. Simple stuff, but just covering it. Lastly, in the move selection, I reset the character skin as I go between characters, because otherwise it was causing an issue where, like, if I changed my character skin here and then went to the other character, he was in skin too, which I don't feel like is really a good method of doing that, especially if not all characters have the same amount of skins, which they may. But if they don't, then that could get you into trouble. You also see I had this animated material, which was also credit from Anima Mundi, so thank you very much. This looks much better. The actual, like the glowing or flashing or whatever you want to call it of the selection box there. In our change outfit function, I also wanted to make sure that we could not change outfits if the stage select screen was up, just because I thought it was a little bit weird, and especially if you had like multiple editions of a stage, you'd probably want to use the same button that we used to change skins. So you can see if I'm pressing it here, they don't change skins. Just a minor thing, but something I think that makes the game a lot cleaner in the end. Another little thing that I've adjusted, again due to Discord suggestions, is I've gone ahead and fixed the way the materials work. I mean, the way they were working was fine before. However, adding more materials to them was not the easiest thing in the world, because we had to set it up and kind of assign them one by one. So what I've done now is I have this change character skin event, which we've been using, but I set a skin index, set the materials based off that index, and then every time I want to access that index afterward, I just call get skin index, as opposed to setting the materials in their slots based off of some event that we've forced. So this is for change to damage materials, but I also use it here, which is reset X attack effects, which I'll show you in another episode, and here. Okay, so yeah, all my special logic now can easily be changed with the skin index. We can also add many more materials. Alright guys, and that's about it for me. That's pretty much how you can make a functioning pause menu. There's really not much more to it than that. That's all the logic that you'll need to do for that. Obviously, there will be more specific to your game, and there'll be more that's specific to things like the command list. But as far as the pause menu itself goes, all it really wants to do is pause the game and then guide us to where we can go next. And I believe both of those have been accomplished. So, as far as the future goes, I'm going to start trying to kind of lay out the series at the end of these episodes, because you guys seemed to like that the last time I did it. So we're going to be covering 2-player menus for pretty much all the menus in the game. Don't necessarily have to go over all of them, but I want to really set up how we're going to be kind of structuring that. And again, that starts with the command list episode. I also am going to add controller input for all the menus in the game. And I've been working on AI and even networking in the background so that I can kind of get some stuff ready for you. I'm not ready to release that yet, because I want to get it into a state where I'm confident that it will be as easily explained as possible, and also so that I can get more progress done on it and potentially answer some questions a little bit better as I'm saying it, because they're definitely going to be multi-part episodes, and I'd like to be well equipped with the knowledge before explaining that to you, so that I don't say the wrong things and confuse anybody. Anyway, guys, that's all I got. So thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed and this helped you make a pause menu or helped you make something for your game, please subscribe. It does more for me than anything else you can do, and I really appreciate it. Huge shout out to Anima Mundi and everyone in my YouTube membership and Patreon supporter list. These guys, they help me a ton with actually being able to, continue this series and put as much time into it as I do. So I really appreciate it. And thank you guys for just giving me the support and giving me the love. Okay, another thing, guys, and this is important. So I usually talk about Twitch here, but we just did our first ever programming live stream on Twitch, and it was a lot of fun. We worked on a Super Mario Brothers style game where I was the mannequin and we had an enemy who was a mannequin. If I jumped on his head, he would get squished and destroyed, but if I hit him anywhere else, I got launched back and took damage and got some invincibility frames and stuff. And we did that in just about 2 hours live stream. We were chatting and having fun. So if you're interested in coming to that, every other Friday we will be doing a Twitch live stream from 6 to 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time at twitch.tv/Shawnthebro27, and you can check that out. We will also be doing YouTube live streams for the same thing every other Friday. So one Friday is on Twitch, one Friday is on YouTube, and we will be covering everything you need to do for a side-scroller platforming game, just like Mario or any other. We'll be kind of going over that logic, and we'll be doing it live, all live. I won't make any changes off stream unless I have to research something, because I'm not entirely sure how I want to do it. And yeah, so it'll be right here on this channel live. I'll schedule it beforehand, so I may need to figure that out, but just look out for the alerts and you can come join, and I'll even answer some questions while we're there. Alright guys, thank you so much for watching. I'm Shawnthebro, and I'll see you in the next one. Goodbye guys.